We love that we have moved somewhere where we don't have to worry about our child in a school that's going to have a school shooting. There's some speech that is perfectly free now, um, and very little of that is nice. One of the first things that we saw happen was they completely eliminated any foreign aid. When I was a federal servant, our oath of loyalty was to the Constitution. It was never to a president. The values that we moved here to be a part of continue to grow and continue to be the values within the EU.
Is the housing market okay in Valencia? Do you think the fact that a lot of people are coming in is upsetting that? Because then the locals can be not so receptive. I feel like in Porto there's some hostility. And for me personally, I'm totally okay with that because I met yesterday a Chinese woman. And then she said, "Oh yeah, I bought a house in Porto. I loved it so much. I will move here." And for me, it's like amazing. You love my city, great. But I know some people will be like, "Oh, these immigrants," you know. So, did you feel any negative reaction when you tried to connect with people when you moved in?
Hi everyone! Today on the new episode on Voting with Your Life, my name is Ike and I'm here with Lexi as always, and today also with Matt from the US. Hi Matt, how are you today?
Hi, doing well, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here with us. You came last year from the US after Trump was elected the second time. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your life in the US before it all started.
Oh gosh. So I used to work for FEMA, which is the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency. So whenever there were natural disasters or big disasters within communities, I was part of the team that we would do emergency response and help communities get back on their feet. And my husband was still is a realtor for residential or homes in the Washington, D.C. region. Everything was pretty normal, well, as normal as it could be in terms of where America has been getting to. But after the inauguration in January, there was a lot of upheaval around me, and quickly within the first couple weeks, I was seeing what was happening within the federal bureaucracy and among agencies. And there was, many people may have heard DOGE, which was supposed to come in and create efficiency, which at the end of the day didn't create any efficiency, didn't create any cost savings, but they did come in and plunder data and did a lot of firing. So there was a lot of getting rid of federal employees. And then there was the offer of buyouts. So there was an initial buyout in February offering people a severance package if they would leave government service. At the time, I still chose to remain as a government servant, but then things began to get worse in terms of how they were treating the federal workforce. The cuts that they were making, they were directing that anything related to climate change had to be removed. We began seeing people within health professions they would show up to work and their badges would no longer work. And that was how they found out that they were being fired. They were making cuts to vaccine research or cancer research, calling it waste. One of the first things that we saw happen was they completely eliminated any foreign aid. And I had a lot of friends who worked in foreign aid. And then all of a sudden there was no funding. So there were warehouses full of vaccinations to just spoil and go bad in Africa that were intended for children. So seeing all of this happen, and seeing how the workforce was being transformed, and seeing how now there was going to be an emphasis on loyalty tests and checking people's social media to see if they were loyal, not to the US, but were they loyal to this administration? which to me was always dangerous. When I was a federal servant, our oath of loyalty was to the Constitution. It was never to a president. It was never to an individual. It was to the Constitution. So to see all of that changing and to see how much my own agency was being cut, and a sense of fear hanging over everyone in everything that we did, and in not being able to give aid to communities that needed it. There was a lot of my colleagues began leaving when the offers came out. And so when the second time they came around with an offer of providing compensation if you leave government service, having a good idea that things were not going to be ending well for anyone in the workforce, I decided that it was time. And my husband's business was also taking a huge hit because all of a sudden real estate kind of froze because people were afraid to sell their home or buy a home. Now you had all of these unemployed former federal service members who were worrying about whether or not they could even pay their mortgage, their home loan. So with all of that uncertainty and confusion, it created a big panic in terms of people selling or buying real estate. And it was at that point that we felt like it was time to get out. We had already had some of those conversations after the first Trump administration. And then when Biden was elected, there was still so much of America that had voted to continue the Trump policies that I felt were very bad in the first administration. It left us feeling uneasy about where our country was going. There was just such a sense of anger and hatred towards other people and a demonization of people that my husband and I felt like we were living in a country that no longer reflected the values that we had been brought up to believe in. We had grown up, our families had instilled in us values of caring for others, of loving others, of helping. And now we were finding ourselves in a culture that just seemed to thrive on fear and hatred and anger, and everyone was always so angry. And so even after Biden won, we were beginning to have these conversations of, we live in a culture that doesn't reflect our values anymore. So even in 2022, we were beginning to talk about what would it look like to live somewhere else, to live somewhere that more closely reflects the values that we believe in. So then with the Trump 2.0 is what I'll call it, it felt like it was time. And at that point, since I was no longer employed as a federal employee, competing for, well, seeing that there was going to be so many other people competing for the same jobs, we knew that we had to leave Washington, D.C. There was no job market, not a prospect for finding a great job. We had a lot of friends who were trying to find jobs, and they couldn't even get jobs at grocery stores or at a hardware store. And these were people who used to manage large amounts of money and run big programs, now couldn't even get a job making coffee. So we knew we needed to leave Washington, D.C. So it was a matter of, do we leave and move somewhere else in the U.S., or do we leave? And that's when it came back to the question around, what are the values that we believe in? Is there somewhere in the U.S. that we feel shares those values? And funny enough, we actually were talking about Minneapolis, Minnesota, to move
Well,
to.
the values are there.
Yeah, there's a phrase of we dodged a bullet.
Literally.
Because that's the only place we were considering, because we have a lot of family and friends that live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And Minnesota is a wonderful state with amazing people. It's a great place to raise a family. And now they seem to be targeted so badly. It's been horrible to see what's been happening to our friends and family there. but then the issues around healthcare came up, and it was kind of, healthcare is so expensive in the US
Mm-hmm.
that we need somewhere where we can afford to live and not have to work just to be able to afford healthcare. We
So
need to
then
be
you
able to,
chose
yeah,
Spain,
we need to be able
right?
to afford rent and
Yeah,
groceries
of course.
in addition to healthcare. Um, and so we felt like we needed to look outside the US,
Hmm.
and find somewhere that was actually interested in its people.
So what
Uh,
countries did you look at?
so I was focused on my job at the time. My husband was really the one who began looking at different countries. So we were looking at, he came up with a list of criteria. Has to have a good education system, has to
Hmm.
have good healthcare, has to be have good LGBT rights, so that we're not at risk, especially two gay men with a daughter.
Hmm.
Has to uh, be affordable. So out of this, there were these countries that started popping up to the top. Um, from New Zealand to Uruguay to Costa Rica to Canada, the Netherlands, Denmark, Spain, Portugal, Malta. Those were probably the top ones that kept coming and bubbling up. Um, and then of that, we began narrowing it down. Thailand is beautiful. We loved our travels in Thailand. Um, Culturally, we felt like we needed to be somewhere that was going to be more culturally familiar.
Okay.
Um, and then we were looking at affordability. Denmark, not so affordable
Hmm.
for our situation. Canada's a little cold in the winter. Uh, Uruguay, too remote. If we move to Uruguay, no one's coming to visit us because it's not easily accessible to everywhere else.
Hmm.
In 2017, my husband and I had our first visit to Spain, and we fell in love with Spain.
Hmm.
Um, and for the next 2 years, we traveled a lot to Spain, and then we were kind of, okay, we need to start visiting other places as well. So we would visit other places, but we would always compare it back to, could we see ourselves living here more than we could see ourselves living in Spain? We would always come back to Spain.
Hmm.
Um, I think at the end, it probably came down to about Portugal and Spain. Um, the thing about Portugal was we don't know any Portuguese. And whereas we are definitely not anywhere close to fluent in Spanish, we at least had some background in Spanish. Hablo español un poquito. And as our friends here keep saying, they keep telling us poco a poco. So little by little, we're improving on our Spanish. And our daughter had learned some Spanish at a school in DC when we lived there.
Hmm.
So we thought, let's make this easier on ourselves because there's going to be a lot of change. And we've always loved Spain. We're at least familiar with the Spanish language. So let's be kind to ourselves. And so that's how we arrived on moving to Spain.
How hard was the decision though? Because of course you left a whole life behind.
It was, in some ways, it was very easy. In some ways, it was very hard. I had mentioned before that having the loss of my job and the realization that we can't live in Washington, D.C. any longer. So even if we stay in the US, we have to move somewhere else. Um, we had built a sense of community in the neighborhood in Washington, D.C. that we lived in. Um, it's a neighborhood called 16th Street Heights. And we had our child, that's the only community she had ever known in terms of living in. So
Hmm.
from birth up until the time we left, she had always been part of this community, this neighborhood inside the city of Washington, D.C., which just was such an amazing community. We call them our family of choice because for us, our neighbors were our family. We spent time at their house. They would spend time at ours. Um, and there was a sense of closeness. There was a sense of trust where we knew that they were looking out for our child. We were looking out for each other's children. And so there was this wonderful community that we were now going to be leaving, which created a big sense of loss. When we announced to our neighbors in June of last year that we were going to be moving, there were a lot of tears, but one of the first things they said is, you cannot go out quietly, and there will be a big party, and you do not get to throw your own party.
Oh.
We are already organizing a party for you. So the Saturday before we moved to Spain, we had over 140 people all coming in and out of our house. Plenty of cava and food and a huge jamón ibérico that we were slicing off pieces of throughout the night. So it was very hard leaving
The
that
community,
family.
the family.
But one of the comforting things was all of them who were also in the midst of experiencing all that's currently happening in the US were telling us, we appreciate the decision you're making and we think you're making the right decision. We would love to have them come over here and join us. And at some point, maybe out of necessity, some of them will need to. But it was very hard to leave our home there. But at the same time, we were determined that we had a bad situation that we were in. What do we take out of that? And because we choose how we respond to what's thrown our way. So out of the loss of my job, out of the freezing of the real estate market, we chose to take control of what happens next. And for us, what happens next was we find a new place that we can move our family to where we feel like we can thrive and grow and embrace a culture that shares values similar to what we have.
Matt, you had talked about, so now you are talking about your chosen family, your community, but at the same time, you had mentioned that the society was being more divided. So if you could tell us a bit more about your, like, let's say, biological family, because at the same time, for your daughter, it's the grandparents, it's the uncles, it's the aunts, and how did she deal, and how did you help her deal with the loss of both communities? How did it feel for all of you?
Yeah, that's been a little trickier. For both my husband and I, we come from very conservative families. And one of the realities that we had to deal with was a large portion of our families are very much in favor of what is currently happening. They voted for this, they believe in this, and it's been painful to see family, biological family, who no longer seem to share the values with us that they had actually taught us to believe in. But they instead have rallied behind this sense of anger and wanting to demonize other people, or as they call it, owning the libs, where they want things to happen to liberals, not because it's the right thing, but just because they're so angry at the libs that the liberals deserve it. It's been hard to explain that to our child in terms of, because she's 12 now and she sees these misalignment in values. So we've had to have a lot of conversations around, how do we love in the middle of this? How do we still love our family? How do we continue to show empathy, show love, but understand that they don't share the same values that we have. For her, most of her day-to-day interaction was really with our community in Washington, D.C. She's always known her grandparents and many of her cousins, and she misses them. At the end of the day, it's hard to say. She understands it. She enjoys talking to them and enjoys hearing from them. And so we try to keep that communication up.
And the community that was chosen, like, so she was going to school, she had neighbors, you said that you were in each other's houses, so that was the most difficult part, I assume, because she had to make
Yes.
friends all over again.
Right. Especially her best friend. I think one of the things that made moving to Spain easier for her was her best friend and her mother were also looking to move as well. And they actually moved to Granada in September of last year. So that helped a lot, knowing that her best friend was moving over here. So the girls are talking every day, even though one is in Granada and ours is here in Valencia. That has helped make it easier for her.
Just for people who have no idea how Spain looks like, how many kilometers between Granada and Valencia?
If I'm not
Can you
sure
visit
how
on the
many I would
weekend?
even guess, but I know if you're driving, it's about 5 hours to drive
Okay.
from Valencia to it. That's with stopping to eat a lunch on the way. But it's about 5 hours to drive from Valencia to Granada, and that is the quickest way to get between the two. Because if you do the train, you have to go into Madrid and then south, and so you're looking at 7 to 8 hours to get to Granada.
Yeah, the railways are still in progress. It's slow progress, but it's good for them that they can feel together, even if they are not together daily. They're like, oh, my friend is close by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How is your daughter handling the language? Is she now going to a Spanish school or to an American school? Probably she learns very fast, as children are like a sponge. But tell us a bit about that. Yeah.
It has certainly been an adjustment
Mhm.
moving from Washington, D.C. to here. So there's some changes in terms of academics, things that she had already learned there that, or things that she hadn't, which are different here. She's having to learn the metric system, which is great. We have her at the British school here.
I see.
One of the things that we were trying to be cautious of, because we had talked a lot, my husband and I had talked a lot about just putting her into a regular public school here and letting her do the full immersion, which I think would help her learn Spanish much more quickly.
Mhm.
But knowing that we were now going into secondary years and going through changes and changing our friends, changing our neighborhood, we felt like it would be easier for her to be learning Spanish, but maybe not get full immersion right as soon as we land.
Mhm.
I think one of the things we had not counted on, though, is the challenge that now, because of the school she's in, she's having to learn not just Spanish, but she's also having to learn French. And then with the beginning of secondary school, they have to choose between German and Mandarin. So she
Oh,
chose German. So now instead of just adding one language, we're now adding 3 languages. I feel sorry for my child.
A
but she's going to
very
be
European experience, though.
exactly. She's gonna be
Yes.
super European. That's amazing.
Yeah, great.
The German and the Spanish, I think, will be so much easier. The French, I've already told her, I don't know that I can help you very much on the French.
Mm.
Well, that's what the school is for as well.
Right.
So
But she's
maybe
doing well. She's made a lot of friends. She's always been a very social person anyways, which is great.
Mhm.
So she's made a lot of friends here, and she has adjusted. I think she has adjusted to life here even better than my husband and I have.
Okay,
If you were to ask her if she wants to move back today, she would tell you no.
that's
Okay.
great. And so probably she already has like a lot of friends who speak Spanish too, and she gets into the language really quickly.
Yes, there is a story that my husband very proudly likes to tell everyone about her picking up some of the Spanish. We went to a Mexican restaurant here in Valencia, and I wanted a margarita that was liquid, not frozen. And in the US, we would say a margarita on the rocks. That
Mm.
doesn't translate right to say margarita on the rocks here. And I was trying to ask the waitress, and Libby spoke up and said, "No, no, 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 margarita liquida, no granita."
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
Um, so the fact that my child was ordering my margarita for me at a Mexican restaurant makes my husband quite proud.
I get that. I would also be very proud.
Yeah, but now you have to be careful so she doesn't order the
Yeah.
margarita for herself at this age.
Absolutamente.
Absolutely. But also about community. I talked with some other people with the idea of coming on the podcast that were living in Valencia, and one of them told me that she doesn't feel super integrated in the, let's say, the community of Spanish people in Valencia, because the expat community is great. So she feels like super connected with them. And here in Porto as well, where I live, I know the expat community is also very welcoming. So how do you feel? Do you feel like you really want to go for the Spanish experience? You want to meet people in situation maybe similar to yours? Is it both at the same time? How are you navigating that? Like if you want to get advice, if you want to have hobbies, how do you do it?
So we have had a lot of conversations around that because the reality is in 2025, especially, um, I'm still amazed. I guess I shouldn't be very surprised. There have been a lot of Americans moving out of the US since last year.
Mhm.
When we started our visa process, the agency that we worked with, we were talking and sharing our reasons for doing the visa and why we were planning to move to Spain. And so at the end of the um, meeting with her, I asked her, I said, so I have a question. Are you seeing are you seeing many Americans applying for visas?
Mhm.
She said, well, I'll be honest with you. She said, um, thanks to your president, we have seen a huge increase in the number of Americans seeking visas. And she said, we are thankful that you want to come to Spain, but we are sad for the circumstances
Hmm.
Mhm.
behind why you feel the need to move to Spain, which was so made us feel so welcome. Um, and
Understood.
that she expressed that kind of care. And in moving here, we discovered, as I'm sure other parts of Spain have experienced as well, there are a lot of Americans that have moved here since last summer.
Mhm.
Um, and we've quickly made friends with a lot of them. And so we have a very active social life with a we have an active social life, especially with a lot of other families from the British school. So a
Mhm.
lot of American families, some British, some Ukrainians, some Russian. Um, so there's that international component. And then, of course, the natural affiliation or affinity, the natural affinity for other families who share our values, who come from the US that we enjoy hanging out with. So we've spent a lot of time with them. But one of the things that Brett and I, in moving to Spain, we've also been very mindful and purposeful in wanting to ensure that we are integrating ourselves into life in Spain, because we're not moving here to transplant American culture and bring it here. In many ways, there are parts of American culture which we're happy to escape from. We love that we have moved somewhere where we don't have to worry about our child in a school that's going to have a school shooting. Because you don't have people running around going into schools shooting up kids. Whereas in the US, it's just accepted as the price of freedom, which is insanity to me. But so coming back in terms of wanting to be intentional, in terms of we're here to be a part of the Spanish fabric. We're here to integrate and to experience this culture. So there is an easiness in terms of finding ourselves with the expat community, but we're also choosing to make friends with the shopkeepers at the stalls in the market next door to us. And we're getting to know them. The couple that run the gelato shop outside the market, we've loved getting to know them and finding out more about their story. And he's Valenciano. And so we've been intentionally looking for those opportunities to integrate and socialize with Spaniards, because otherwise, how can you integrate if you're not making those connections? My husband has joined a chorus, singing chorus, where half of the choir are Valencianos. And he's absolutely loving that. And then we go to social hours where it's a mix of people getting together. So any of these opportunities that we're finding that provide avenues for us to meet more of the Spanish, even in interacting with our neighbors here. We're trying to take advantage of all of those opportunities because it helps us learn more about where we're moving into, and it makes us feel more a sense of belonging.
That's great. I feel that by the number of opportunities you mentioned, that it's working well, that you are feeling like it's working. So that's amazing. And I know that in Spain, for example, in Barcelona, they are really tired of, especially tourists, not just people moving in, but a bit all over Europe, in Porto as well. There's this fear that people are coming in, and maybe your husband as a position on these, like as a realtor. What does he think is going on in the market? Like, is the housing market okay in Valencia? Do you think the fact that a lot of people are coming in is upsetting that? Because then the locals can be not so receptive. I feel like in Porto, there's some hostility. And for me personally, I'm totally okay with that, because I met yesterday a Chinese woman. And then she said, "Oh yeah, I bought a house in Porto. I loved it so much. I will move here." And for me, it's like, amazing, you love my city. Great. But I know some people will be like, "Oh, these immigrants," you know? So did you feel any negative reaction when you tried to connect with people when you moved in?
We have not. We have not felt any negative interaction. I think it's been very few stories that we have heard here in Valencia of fellow expats experiencing that. But I think with at least among the American expats who have arrived since last year, we have all been very conscious and aware of how this creates pressure on housing availability. Unfortunately, we're not bringing answers because we're moving here. We're not the policymakers, but certainly I understand the need for there to be additional housing, and that we aren't just displacing the people who are from here, who have lived here for generations. So I can understand the source of tension and appreciate how this does create some of that. And
but you didn't feel that negative aspect?
Not here.
Okay, that's awesome.
People in Valencia have been so welcoming and warm.
I feel like it's the state's job to create also a bit more housing, because it's even without people coming in, there's a lot of people that are from here and they are just leaving their house abandoned. They are moving out but keep the house there. So there's a lot of this. But perhaps your husband will be like part of the solution as well, trying to work the market around. And you have mentioned that you go to the supermarket, you have the community around the school as well. But did you find a job already that you feel that substitutes, that replaces your past job, like in emergency relief, or are you looking for opportunities in other areas?
So in June of last year, knowing that I needed to change jobs, I started up a travel business. So I'm running a travel business. At this point, it's mostly geared towards Americans who are looking to travel. But then also I'm looking to expand to be able to market and promote my travel consulting services regardless of where you're from. And I've already started doing some of that. But helping people, one of the things that my family has always loved to do is we love to travel. And for us, traveling is not just checking the boxes of, yes, I've been to the Eiffel Tower, or yes, I've been to the Colosseum in Rome, but trying to make it transformative. Everywhere we go, what is the culture we're experiencing? What are the things that we're observing? Watching our child when she was 5 years old as we traveled through Southeast Asia, it was amazing to see how she experienced Laos and Cambodia and Thailand as a 5-year-old. And working with her before we even got to those countries to help her understand, so when we go to the temples, here's what we need to do. We need to make sure that those leggings are kept down below our knees, and helping to instill within her a sense of appreciating wherever we're at and understanding some of the culture. And at the very least, whatever country we're in, can you at least say hello and thank you? And for me, travel has always been a way of experiencing the broader world and expanding my mind and expanding my horizons. Having grown up in a very strict, conservative, religious family, there was always this box of, you don't stray outside the box. This is what we believe, nothing more. But through traveling, I feel that traveling and experiencing other cultures helps us to learn more about ourselves, learn more about others, and begin to identify, okay, maybe our culture isn't the best. Maybe we do great in some of these things, but going to Southeast Asia, observing some of the sense of community and reverence for elders, that's completely lacking in the US. And I think it'd be helpful if there was some more of that. So appreciating those types of things. And in this travel business that I started up, the thought behind it was, especially in the US, people are overstressed, overworked, angry, afraid. How can I help them get out of where they're in, put them in a different culture, and help to curate or to create an itinerary for them where they can not just sightsee, but to experience what this other place has to offer, so that they can go back refreshed, recentered, have a better understanding, not just of the world around them, but a better understanding of them. So I've enjoyed doing that. At the same time, so in addition to the travel business, I'm currently looking for opportunities within the EU, because I have a lot of years of experience at FEMA in emergency management. One of the last projects I did for the agency was to create a 4-year technology strategic plan for the agency of how can we better use technology to provide better emergency response. Unfortunately, when the new administration came in, that whole strategic plan that I had worked so hard on got thrown into the trash can. So I feel like I have skills, and there's so many other former FEMA people who I believe that there are skills in that that could be leveraged for helping the EU as the EU continues to work on issues of emergency management. So I'm looking for those types of opportunities as well within the EU.
It's very
I hope.
interesting that you're talking about this, because before the interview, Lexi and I were talking about this, because currently I live in Italy, and in Sicily, I don't know if you saw on the news that half of a town just collapsed, and in Portugal there is like really harsh storms right now, and the EU could really benefit from emergency plans and better infrastructure sometimes. So
Yes,
that
and
would be
it's just not the number of people, it's actually the strategy, the mindset of how can we use technology and how can we be prepared? Because we have a complete lack of preparedness. And in these towns, they were caught by surprise by something that was on the website of the Weather Institute 1 week before. And the civil protection was not there, the police was not there, the army took a week to be activated to help, they could. And now we people, normal citizens, we want to go there and bring donations, bring food, bring tarps to cover the ceilings. And there is not a centralized platform that we can use to ask and to give. And so civil society created platforms, and then you had like 5 different platforms. It was not centralized still. Now you still have two. So all of that knowledge that you have, I'm sure Portugal, Spain, Italy, and a lot of the EU can still benefit from it, especially as climate change is gonna. So I hope you really find
Absolutely.
the opportunities.
so. Please keep
Absolutely.
going.
Thank you. And yeah, happy to any contacts you would have that would get me plugged into that. So I've been leaning on some of the expat community who from other parts of the EU, as far as do you know people?
Mm.
Because I've always I've always been passionate about helping others, and I believed in the mission of FEMA in how we took care of others. Um, and yes, looking for those opportunities to be of service within the EU as well.
Amazing. Maybe we can shift to a topic that maybe is a bit more boring, but anyway, it's still very interesting to us. The whole paperwork. How was it applying for a visa? How was it getting healthcare in the EU? How difficult was it to find accommodation? Can you maybe talk a bit about that?
So I think the biggest, was it the easiest? No. And I think that my family probably had a better experience than some other expat families that we have talked to. But at the end of the day, one of the realizations we have is we've never worked in, we have never been in this type of situation before where we're immigrating to somewhere else. So everything is new to us.
Mm.
So we entered into this whole process understanding that we've never done this before. Of course, it's going to be confusing. Um, Bureaucracy is always, it doesn't matter what country, there's always some level of bureaucracy. Uh, Prior to working at FEMA, I had done consulting work for citizenship and immigration in the US.
Okay.
And even in the US, one of the assignments I had was looking at how all of the technology systems fit together within citizenship and immigration services in the US. And it was like looking at a bowl of spaghetti. Everything was just twisted and turned, and this system didn't talk to this. And then the process, the physical process that people would have to do for immigrating to the US, it's not straightforward. It's also confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely have a deeper appreciation for people who have been trying to immigrate to the US of what experience they must have had. We actually, we were in such a rush to get here. So before the interview, I had mentioned that we didn't even begin our visa process until the end of May last year. And we arrived in mid-August of last year. The only reason we were able to get that accomplished was because we had the luxury of working with an agency to help us out. Um, we found an agency, it seemed reasonably priced, And we had so much that we had to do back in the US to close things out that we knew we needed help if we were going to try and get to Spain by the time the new school year began. But there was a lot of work involved in getting that visa, in having to get original documents and have them apostilled and then translated, and making sure we had the right paperwork and the right financial records. And there were times it was frustrating because we thought we had given the information that was needed. It'd come back, we'd have to revise or change and provide additional information. But at the same time, we realized that Spain's rules. We want to move here. This is how it works. And it requires a lot of patience and understanding on our part that each country has its own unique bureaucracy, its unique way of doing things. So,
on that note, we had a previous guest that he came from Pakistan to Germany. And one of the things he was required to do was he had to deposit 10,000 euros into an account that was still his, but just to give Germany the trust that he was going to be okay there. Was there a similar requirement for Spain, or do they just like, you had to submit financial records, but did they ask you for any deposit, for example?
So I don't recall for Spain that we had to do a financial deposit. We did have to provide annual income statements showing how much money we earn, and showing that that's a steady income that's continually coming in. So we provided all those records.
Okay, so
and then also for my husband's business, he had to provide a contract showing that he was still tied to a company back in the US that he had been working with for over a year. It's a company he's been with for 18 years now.
Whoa.
Showing that it was a contract that allowed him to still do his job, but be able to do it from Spain.
Okay.
For his particular visa, no more than 20% of his income can be from within Spain. Excuse me.
Okay, what if that changes? Does he have to apply for a different visa, or?
If that were to, so if he wanted to start a business here, then he would need to apply to change the type of visa.
Okay, and how long does it last? Like, how often do you think you will have to renovate your visa? Is it something that worries you, or it's just like, okay, it's just going to be there and check a box?
So for our visa, we are good for 3 years. And then there's a renewal after that. So after that 3 years, demonstrating that, yes, indeed, we have still been earning this amount each year as a minimum. And in order to be eligible for renewal.
Okay, and then for like, is there a residence more permanent permit or type of thing that you can apply for? Like not to
Eventually.
be citizen, but to be residents full time.
So we just got our TA cards, which is our residence permit. And that is good for the next 3 years. And then we would need to get our residence permit renewed as well.
Okay.
Amazing.
So it's 3 by 3.
So maybe, we can come back a bit. What is it like for you to see the news, what's happening in the US? How do you feel?
Yeah, watching from abroad, see everything develop, the comment sections on social media.
It's been really difficult. And we've tried to be, I'm probably reading the news too much, but I also feel like I need to stay informed. We have some friends here who are expats, excuse me,
All right.
who they are trying to avoid the news as much as possible. To me, that feels almost like putting our head in the sand and ignoring. I think one of the reasons that I try to stay informed is we have so many family and friends still back in the U.S.
Mhm.
And it's important that we know what's happening to them and what they're going through. I've always been a student of history. I love history. I did my graduate work in public policy and have a long history in terms of government service. It's been very hard to watch what has happened and see how all of these things that we thought were safeguards for our, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
No worries,
Take
of
your
course.
time.
All these safeguards that we thought we had in place to ensure the permanence of democracy, the permanence of our norms of governance would remain. And the past year has just been watching a complete disregard. Watching the various branches of government just sit by and allow things to happen when their job is to serve as a check or a balance. And how one of the things among Americans, we always talk about our Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the freedom of the press, freedom of speech. And to see the disregard for that if you only have a certain type of speech. There's some speech that is perfectly free now, and very little of that is nice. But just this trampling of people's private rights and watching people in neighborhoods have their doors pounded in without proper warrants. It's been very hard to see what's happening in the US and feeling like we are now in a very new era. And even if one of my concerns is with the midterms this year, assuming that we still have midterm elections, is that even if things completely got changed, it is impossible to go back to the way things were.
Mhm.
Because trust in the system is broken. It can't be restored overnight. There is now no more trust that the system works beyond the ability of money to influence or to buy power. And it's really hard to see that, having been as proud of being part of the bureaucracy, being part of the American system for so much of my life, and to see that change, to see America become more isolated and disregard its allies has been difficult as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens from the US. And at this point in time, I think things have changed so much that we don't anticipate moving back.
Okay, that was.
We believe that we are now here. We are looking to remain here. We want our child to grow up here in the hopes that the values that we moved here to be a part of continue to grow and continue to be the values within the EU. Because those are the values we believe are important for our child to be raised up in. Another concern has been seeing how many of these voices of vitriol and anger in the US are coming over to Europe to do speeches and speak at conferences in the hopes of taking what is happening in the US and bringing it here. And that I find very alarming.
Yeah.
In Spain, I think at the moment you have what they call a socialist prime minister, even if he's not like really socialist, but he's like center left. So
Hmm.
at the moment, I even saw recently his government gave the legal status to a lot of immigrants that were undocumented or not properly documented. So it's like the opposite of what's happening in the US.
Right.
Do you feel like the situation is stable and that Spain will continue to thrive on this route? Or do you feel, maybe the people you know, you've met, that the far right is also growing?
I have no doubt that the far right is growing. I think one of the important things is similar to many in my family. Oftentimes, there's an element of truth at the the seed of all of the anger, the vitriol. There is a sense of feeling left out, feeling like you've been
Mhm.
pushed to the side. Within the US, a lot of the industrial base, the people who make the cars, the people who make ovens or stoves,
Mhm.
farmers, didn't feel like they were taken care of. But that disillusionment then became something that not so nice people fed into. And they found that there was some discontent that they could make flame up
Mm.
and create a narrative that then blows up into something like what we're seeing in the US. So I think it's very important here within the EU to understand that there are kernels of truth that are then used by bad actors to create a full-on cause. Um, so getting at the core of what is the source of the issue? Is it housing? Because I understand the pressure around housing. Is it security of a job? How do we make sure that we are taking care of all of our community,
Mhm.
um, and showing how community continues to work together as a way of negating the hate and the vitriol and the anger towards others? And it's a careful balance. Unfortunately, I don't think the US was able to continue with that balance. And now you have just a lot of anger on all sides.
I think it's really important for the EU to learn from what's happening in the US, because whatever Democrat that comes next will have a really hard time. You mentioned the trust in the system is gone or eroded. And I think either if the next Democrat president wins the elections and if Trump concedes democratically, which is also in question, it's going to be really difficult to rebuild everything internally and externally. And so the EU really has to learn and prevent that. And I think the recipe that you're giving us is really important. That it's to take care of each other more and not less. Like when someone is trying to divide us, we are like, no, let's unite even more. Let's be with more love, with more cooperation.
Right.
And well, I can say thank you for being here as well to help build that.
Thank you. One of the things that I was pondering was the other day, in terms of differences between the EU and here, is the role that CEOs and money plays. And I understand that happens everywhere.
Mhm.
I have an appreciation for how the EU seems to have a better way of ensuring that CEOs, that mega corporations aren't what drives all the decisions. In the US, one of the things that I've observed the past few years is how you have the Microsoft, you have X, you have Palantir, you have these, especially within technology, what we call the tech bros,
Mhm.
have amassed so much power. And with that power, obscene amounts of money. And it's kind of the amazing thing is they're still looking for more to the detriment of all their employees. You have the Washington Post, which is owned by a technology giant. Washington Post is now decimated. 16,000 of his employees had just been laid off for a company that he has how much money now? And my hope is that the EU I've enjoyed seeing how the EU is standing up to some of this and saying you can't do that here. And I hope the EU continues to pursue that, because America has, for several years now, bought into this mantra of greed is good, money is power. And I think we're seeing the results of what that leads to.
Yeah, I think the EU is doing a bit, is on that way, but we are also still learning what our power is, because unless the United States, the EU is not a federation, at least yet, there are a lot of aspects like the single market, the monetary policy, that we are a federation, but then on defense and on foreign policy, which tend to be important, we are not. We are, in that case, we are just a group of states deciding together. And so it's quite difficult to stand up, for example, against Russia, against Trump's possible invasion of Greenland. And the US, in that sense, it works because you don't have
Right.
New York randomly saying, no, we don't want to do this trade deal. And then everything stops for weeks or months. So there are things we can learn from the US as a system of government, and then also the current situation that is not so good.
Right.
Ike, do you have more questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask Matt if there's anything that you want to say at the end of this episode.
Something you wanted to say, but we didn't ask.
I think we have covered so much of it. I'm certainly appreciative of my time here, and that you find value in interviewing me. There is so much that I think the EU, that Europe has, that is kind of a shining light, a shining beacon in the world, especially right now. And I think it's important to be able to tout or to express the great things that do happen here. And just hope it continues. My concern is, well, I anticipate there's going to be a lot more of a expat exodus from the US this year as well. There's a lot of talent that could be leveraged and used to continue to help the EU in their experiment. So, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. We really appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk to us. And yeah, it was amazing to get some insights. And I really hope that your time in Valencia and everybody surrounding you will grow, and that you feel well and safe, also for your husband and your daughter.
Thank you so much.
And from now on, you can count with 2 more friends, one Portuguese that will eventually live in Belgium, and one German that is currently living in Italy. So you are expanding your network as well. And I am sure it will continue forward.
I love it.
Thank
I
you
look forward to being in touch.
to talk with us.